Hello again. Welcome to this another episode of Creator Space with the focus on photography, especially outdoor lighting. So we're in the studio here with technician and the main organizer Tom, and we also have Rob here in the studio to assist with some practical showcases here. So we're going in for a half an hour of explanation of outdoor light. My name is Tjalling Halbertsma, and this is a lesson for, let's say, beginners, but it's also good to refresh your mind. What is it again with outdoor light that makes it difficult and very, very handy? Well, I prepared a couple of slides here for you. We're going through it. I have some example photos, and you can always watch this again later, so you don't have to try to memorize everything right now. So here we go. So it's about exterior photography, which is probably the cheapest thing to do. You don't need a studio for that. It's always there, and you have many different kinds of lights. The joke is about outdoor light. Let it work for you. So, exterior photography. I specifically call these 3 typical lights, but of course you have many more. If you get more advanced, and in every light there's some little changes. But basically, the cloudy sky. We first wanted to do this session outside, but since it's October and it's a rainy day, we decided to do it inside. Cloudy skies, you have sunny skies, sunrise and sunset, which are kind of both the same kind of typical lighting, and a mix of sun and clouds. So I will talk more about these different kind of lightings. So a cloudy sky. Technically, if everything was waterproof, we could have gone outside, but it's also very windy. But cloudy skies is very good for photography, for certain type of photography. If you do, for example, portraits, basically what you have is even lighting from all sides. So imagine you have the sun as a spot. It's your personal, a theater lighting, a spot coming down. And the cloud is a kind of a blanket that is in between the sun and you. But what it does is it makes the light completely even. So the sun is very harsh light, but the clouds are very kind of gentle, soft. What happens is when you have your camera and you make a shot of somebody you want to photograph, you have kind of even lighting. There's no harsh shadow on one side and a very strong beam on the other side. It's beautiful. It's beautiful for black and white. It's called even light, no contrast or hard shadows. So if it's a cloudy or a rainy day, do not hesitate to go out and photograph things in that particular light. And we call it, there are no highlights. So highlight means a very strong beam of light. So I said it's great for portraiture. It's also very beautiful black and white. Best what you can do is then in the camera put it to black and white. In most digital cameras you can do that, and then see what the surrounding is with that light. And because everything is even lighted, there's a lot to see. And if you make sure that the background, which are the clouds, are not overexposed, you can see buildings, people, landscape, and you can play with that kind of typical light. Street photography is also great. can you imagine that if you are in the city, let's say you're in Toronto, you have high-rise buildings and there's a blue sky and the sun comes through. You have a constant shadow, full sunlight, shadow, full sunlight, shadow, full sun. So you got to anticipate where you want to have the person you want to shoot. If you have cloudy sky, basically the light comes from, from all sides, and you have way more spots to make your photo. So it's great for portraiture, black and white, architecture, street photography. It's not great for popping colors. So let's say you have a family of 5, and they all have different colors: red, blue, green, yellow, and one is white, for example. In hard sunlight, it will pop up. It will really pop because it's a theater light of the sun coming straight on these colors, and they reflect back. If you ever seen photos of the Caribbean, that's where colors pop. That's why they have buildings that are full of color, because it's really, really beautiful. Every day it gives kind of a joyous look when the sun comes on these colors, whether it's in shade or it works very fine. But on a cloudy days, the reflection of these colors fall away. So if it's a cloudy day, you're not focusing on making the colors pop. There's no hard contrast. Hard contrast can be a nuisance, but can also be really, really beautiful. If you have, like, just as I mentioned, Toronto street, high-rise buildings, and you have a hard shadow, and the sun is not high, but it's like a little bit on a slant, you have a beautiful shadow, lightning, shadow, lightning, and in that, if you look through your camera and you move yourself in different spots, you will see that it adds to your composition and to your depth. So hard contrast is not there in cloudy skies. So the dynamic of bright light, you should do it with sunlight. That's your spot. So here's a picture. This is a cloudy sky. There's a slight hinge of sun coming a little bit through, but not direct. It's like there's cloud in front of it, and if you would look at the clouds, you see like, oh, there's the sun is there, it's positioned there, but it's not allowing the sunlight to come through. So you can see that if you have a Taylor lens and you focus on the subject, you have a beautiful even light. It's a lot of clarity in that photo. So you can use it at your advantage. This is another one done. This is actually on the World Championship Ski Cross in 2019 in Blue Mountain. Yes. So clouds and snow are a difficult subject. Why? It's because the clouds come in with even light, but the snow is kind of reflecting the light back, which makes your subjects, in this case the skiers, a kind of a darker spot in the white, bright snow. So a day before this was shot, we had sunlight, and it was beautiful. It was just the colors of these ski suits and the helmets, and it was just amazing. Now there was just this, so it's also more difficult to focus on, because you have a lot of light, and sometimes a Taylor lens or a certain camera focus on contrast. So, and they go very fast, so that was difficult. So you're dealing with a white background and darker persons. So what you have to do is then you put it in your post, in your Lightroom or in another post-processing, and you turn up the shadows, because basically if a skier is like this and the light comes from there and the shadow, the reflection from snow here, there's shadow here, so you don't see the face, so you turn up the shadows. I will come back on that. We're going to do some I think some post-processing and Lightroom work in November, which is really, really helpful when you work with your photos later on. So you turn up the shadows. We will come back on that. So this is a typical case of a cloudy sky again, which is beautiful for architecture also, because when you have hard shadows, you know, sunlight, hard shadows, you might not see in the shadow areas the clarity you have as on the brighter sides. Clouds make it even, so it's really great for architecture, because basically everything has a light on it. So this is close to the evening. That's why you see in the bottom of the photo, that's the entrance of the building, orange light. So what happens? Cloudy sky, that's called daylight, and daylight is kind of has a bit of a bluish tone to it, while direct sunlight has a warmer tone, is more yellow. So you get this contrast in the photo, because all these lights in the entrance of this building are warmer light. But it gives a great effect. Even some of the windows you see higher up in that building, they have this orange light. So it's something you can play with. Okay, we're going to the sun and blue sky. Now, the blue sky gives you kind of a blue reflection, but as soon as the sun really comes up higher, so not in sunset or like at 5 o'clock in the morning in the summer, then there's still a lot of blue in there. It's called a blue hour. But let's say it's like 8, 9 o'clock, the sun comes fully in. You have a direct and a full bright light. It's beautiful. It's your personal theater spot in your photography. So you got to use it like that. It's okay, it's there, it's permanent. No, it's not permanent because it turns, but you know, for the moment. So you gotta learn to place your subject or look at the building together with your sunlight. It's your spot. It has different colors and different hours of the day. Well, I already told that. Very strong contrast and hard shadows, which again can be a nuisance if you have portraits or people facing the sun, and but it's also beautiful, the hard shadows. It's a part of your composition. If you look through your camera and you look at the shadows only of buildings, people and everything, the shadows are a subject in itself. Sometimes the shadows are nicer than what's around it. So look at the hard shadows of sunlight, from trees, from your dog, your pet, whatever, from people walking in the street, and you'll be amazed. Very strong contrast, hard shadows will accentuate colors. So a hard theater spotlight on your subject who has a bright yellow color or green, whatever, it's beautiful. It comes out. You need a faster shutter speed, of course. If there's more light, you have to in some way compensate to make the right exposure. I had a previous lesson I did, which you can still find on Creator Space, about exposure, how to get the balance. So I'm not going to talk about that one, but you can use a faster shutter speed to compensate. It's great for landscape because also of the shadows, and you know, if the light comes through the trees, like I made a photo this weekend of the Indian summer. There were clouds, there was just one big beam on that piece of forest, the rest was in kind of shadows. It's amazing how that spot works for you. It's good for street photography also, controlled portraiture, controlled. We're coming back on that in a little exercise in the end of the lesson. Sunrise, sunsets, those are of course perfect, and sport. The reason I say sport is because you need a faster shutter speed to make the light exposure right, but it helps with your subject, so you can freeze them in the air. It's not great for group photos and not for soft lighting. Okay, you probably have seen this one before, but this is for example, a photo of playing with that spotlight, playing with the sun. I choose to have the background and the sunlight and the clouds have the right exposure, and the leaves and the ground make it like a little bit of like a frame setting. If you would have your camera or your iPhone or whatever, and you put it on automatic mode, you cannot do this. Or you can do it, but then you have to play with it. But normally a camera chooses for the average exposure. So that's why it's important that you are in control and not the camera itself. That you choose the right exposure for your own expression. This was done the day after. Here goes Brady Lehman, who's the winner of the Ski Cross World Cup. If you have a chance to see a sport like this, is phenomenal. You see the sun is coming in here. The sun, you can see the reflection on his helmet. So it's coming a bit from the back, but the snow evenly reflects it back. Now it's not evenly, but it gives a lot of reflection back, which means that later in post-processing, I can turn up the shadows a little bit. Like shadows, you move it a little higher up and exposes what is already there. So this is a good use of snow and sunshine, even though the person is not faced to the sunshine, but the sun is at its back. And again, this was done in quick, very fast shutter speed, because he was just stopping there, and he just went over the finish and he won. Okay, Reed Colsett, famous marathon runner here, who runs a marathon in under a half an hour, beat that. I deliberately chose to stand on this place and waited till he was just before the shadow. So you see the shadow before him. So you could see more of his contour of the sunlight. So I advise you to play with these kind of things. You can use a hard shadow and a person in the sunshine to have a nicer, darker background. This is hard sunlight and hard shadows. It's just a playful photo, nothing really special, but when the sun is really harsh, it's really fun to play with the shadows, which is this an example of. Hard there we go. Hard sunlight. Ask for, you can use a lot of fast shutter speed. So I froze the wave that was bouncing against this person. I froze it. So you get a bit of a fun picture here. But that's what you can do with hard sunlight. You can play with your shutter speed. Okay, this is too much reflection from the snow. So here's a skier coming down in the slalom, but the snow, the whole picture, the camera wants to compensate the snow and makes the person in there, which is darker than the snow because he has dark red clothes and a black helmet. You lose the details in the person. So when you do something like this, it's going to be hard to have, you can see the eyes or the mouth and stuff like that. The best is to zoom into that person with a fast shutter speed, so you don't have all the white snow that overblows your photo. It's always a challenge in snow. And probably if you make photos with your iPhone in the snow, you'll see some of them are just not good. Here's a more compensation. This is a little bit of an artistic photo. I use a little bit more blue, and the contrast of the shadows are here harder. But yeah, this is sun and clouds together, and it's just a matter of playing with it. But I put her in the right position so you can see her well. If she would have been in the shadow, it would be more difficult. If she would be only in the white, you wouldn't see her blue jacket, so I compensate a little bit there. All right, portraits in daylight. Portraits on a sunny day. So one thing you have to avoid if you ask somebody to stand in front of your camera, or it's family or friends that you want to shoot. If the spot is over there and the light comes in their face, they're going to do this, right? Because they don't want, it's too hard to get the sunlight in. So you have to put yourself in another position, or ask your family member or a model or whatever to put in another space. Basically, you have to manage that. You have to manage how to play with the light coming to help you. So what you can do, for example, is finding a place in the shade. If we would have done this shoot outside, at this hour, the sun would come down right here from the building. So this wall would not have been in sunlight. It would be shadow, and the sun would be on the ground in here. So I would put the person right in front of the wall, just a little bit in the sunlight, but with a darker background. So the shadow is the background. So the face is much brighter. It's a way to use it. You can also put the person in the shadow and then use the surrounding light. For example, street, ice, snow. If you have black tarmac, it doesn't work so well. But if you have like gravel, it reflects the light and comes back to the face. So these are kind of things, natural surroundings that you can use. So, as I say, often shade benefits of the bright light from the surroundings. Even a building in Toronto can reflect light and come back and is less harsh. What you can do is use another wall to reflect, or use the sun as a backlight, which means that you have light coming here, so the hair will be has kind of a bit of an aura around it. You will see an example. And you can use a reflector, and I'm going to show that in the last 15 minutes. So this is a photo where you use the sun directly behind the person, and it gets a bit of a golden glow. Now, there are many ways to play with that, but you have to find out where I'm going to put the person, or where am I going to stand. It's a matter of playing, and the more you do that, the more you understand, okay, this is the way I'm going to do it. So this is a photo made of, what was it, Laurier runners. You see, the only way they said, okay, you quickly do a portrait. Well, there was only harsh sunlight, the trees were far away, so I just put them in harsh sunlight. But, now I'm going to play with it a little bit. You see, they all squeaked their eyes. So basically, none of these people, you can see their eyes, or a beautiful light in their eyes. They're there, you can see it's a sports team, there's enough light on it and there's everything, but you kind of miss the eyes. So putting them in the sunlight is possible, but it comes at a price. I call it the straight sunlight dilemma. So here we have another example. This is in Montreal. What do you choose? Are you choosing for a silhouette? It can be really beautiful, person silhouette, buildings, even your pet or whatever? Or are you choosing to give the exposure a little different, and then you see the foreground, actually the subjects there? So these are things you can play with. It's all a matter where you're going to stand with your camera, and where your subject is. So we were talking about portraits. Very simple trick to use when there's hard sunlight. Everybody has doors in their buildings. You put somebody inside the door is open, puts inside. The person is in the shady area, the sun is coming from there, here's the doorpost, so the light is coming from surrounding light inside, but the person is in the shady area. Windows, doors, whatever, it doesn't matter. It will help, as long as there's no glass in front of that. It's a very easy trick for portraiture, because the background will be darker. Okay, portraits on a cloudy day. It's very good for black and white, as I said. There's even light from above. What you can do is, for example, if you want to make a portrait of a person, choose a wall or a door that is darker. A black wall or dark wall or what, doesn't matter. Because then the face, the human skin, will be catching all the light and you have a darker background. You get a bit of a studio effect. We're going to exercise on a white wall soon in this lesson, which is a bit more challenging. So you have to expose differently. It's also beautiful, but I recommend to have a bit of a dark background. Even if you have a tree that has a shade in area and you put yourself in that shade area, you catch all the light, but the tree created all this shade around there. This is an example from a person I did in Blue Mountain. Just to show you, cloudy skies give an even light. Very simple. No harsh shadows, you can focus in the eyes. This is also an example. This is in Victoria Island, I think. You see the light coming from, you're in a forest, so it's a bit darker. But the light coming in from the side of the forest gives this beautiful glow over stuff, right? So, bright sunlight tips. Because of the bright light, you have to, in the manual settings, try to be more on the lower side of the ISO. So like 100 to 400. If you can put it on 100, it will benefit your sharpness. If you put it on 1000, you have to compensate that. So that's too much. It's too much light coming in. Stand backwards to the sun. Use a reflector like a board or a sheet, or even if there's a water canal or water, whatever, or ice, there's reflection coming on the ice to the face. These are all natural things that you can use. A light concrete floor. It's better to do it in your photo and, fine-tune it in post-production than you say, oh, I'll do that in post-production, because then you're kind of like overstretching the photo and it's not that good. Stand in the doorways or other shadow areas where sunlight still gives enough light, as I said, with the trees, and wait for a cloud and then take a photo. It's very simple. Cloudy day, sunny clouds, just wait for it, and then the cloud comes in, you have enough light coming from the rest. Okay. So here's a lot of sports photos today. So here's something, this is in Pretty River Valley. A couple of bikers coming through. There's this morning sunlight, it's harsh light, but the trees create a lot of shadows. It's very difficult to get then everybody have a good exposure. Some are too dark, some are too light. So this is just an example to show you. On the left photo, the overexposed, you can see the face, but then on his arm it's overexposed. So you kind of don't want that. It's a little floppy, right? So on the right side, you see it's way more darker, but his skin tones here, his skin and even these areas here, are way darker, but it's correct. So you're better underexposed than overexposed. If it's overexposed, it's very difficult to get it back, even not possible to get it back. If you underexpose, you can play in post-production and put the shadows a little bit up. And then there's more balance of it. So typically for these hard shadow light areas, it's better to underexpose and then do it in post-production, a little bit of shadow, turning up the shadows, than when you ruin it and it's overexposed. This is a photo, it's almost 2:30. Okay. Decide whether you want to stand in relation to bright light. So this is a particular spot I choose because I knew his sail would reflect light in his face. The background is a bit darker. So there's nothing wrong with this photo. Everything has a good light, a sharpness and everything. So just know where you're going to stand. A few examples here. The runner has a light background, so it's hard to get him sharp. If I would focus on him, the background would be all way too light. So choose the place where you're going to stand with your camera. That's what I'm saying. The train here in Switzerland, you know, there's cloud and everything. I have a good camera that has a large dynamic range, so I can turn up the shadows later on. Still, the clouds are good. So that's a little trick. It's better to underexpose than to overexpose. Sunset tips, especially see the beauty of the light. It's your personal spot at that moment. Use it as a bright spot, decide where to stand. Backlit, that means it comes from the back, and use something to reflect it. And the sun of your subject's hair and reflector in front, yeah. Pay attention to your background. A few more examples that you play with the morning sunlight. All of them are before 7 o'clock or 7:30. Okay. Tips on settings. If you have sunrise, probably you have to be between 400 and 1000, depending on what your f-stop is. Your f-stop is your diaphragm. Probably between 8 and 22 for a landscape. A tripod, use it for the sunrise. Use it because you can play with your shutter speed and the camera is completely still. All right. Don't forget to play. This is one for a sunset. I think the best what I could do is just to show all these silhouettes. You see? And you see the reflection in the water. So here's an example, beautiful sunset, but if you do it with automatic, you get this. And then you lose the beauty of the sunset. So try to focus on the sunset, and all these silhouettes are just at your benefit. All right, midday and sunny, 100 to 400 ISO. If you do for landscape, 8 to 22, because you want to have sharpness everywhere. Your shutter speeds between 250 and 1000, because if there's a harsh light. Remember, all settings must create a balanced exposure. Another example of hard shadows. You see, the water is very bright, so you have to find the right balance. It's possible that you overexpose this photo if you don't pay attention. I wanted to see the snowball, so I have to calibrate on the snow, and luckily he was in black, so that was pretty okay. Black and white, very nice for cloudy days, you see? It all makes it very strong contrast. Right exposure, so this is 4K exterior light. There are so many different colors: sunset, starry nights, bluey skies, and then in the shadows you see the flower. So we're going to do a few exercises. I'm going to ask Rob if you can come up. I'm going to show 3 different lightings that are kind of mimicking hard sunlight, and see what you can do with just one little piece of board and how you can stand. So here we go. I'm going to ask Tom if you can switch the cameras. All right. So here we are. I'm going to switch on this light. Am I on this camera, Tom? Yeah, okay. I'm going to switch on this light. So this is our daylight for now, and put it on nice and harsh. Let's say this is kind of the sunlight coming down on you. So what happens is that when I'm photographing here, I'm standing here, you see there's a hard shadow. Bob, can you look at this camera? You see there's a hard shadow. There's full sunlight coming from this side, and this has a lot of shadows. So you can say, okay, fine, that's okay. But when you want to go deeper in portraits and with light and everything, It's quite nice because you see that his next eye is also lightened. So you have a bit of a, it's called a Rembrandt effect. So just a catch of light. But if Rob moves his head more to that camera, it's just divided between two sides. So if I would make a photo from right from that camera, I would grab a, let's say a piece of carton, and I'm just playing around here. You see, if you can move around and give it a bit of, you see, there's a whole difference between this and this, right? So you can play around, and there are different kind of ways to give it light. For example, we have like a big orange thing here. If you want to go a little fancier, look what it does. Look what it does. If you have like a building standing here, you see what a big difference it is. Because it purely reflects the light. So you go down a bit, and you go up. You can do whatever you want. So let's say if this was a concrete thing, you could say like, it also gives light from here. You see? Kind of. So I'm using now a reflector, but you can also say my reflector is a building. So I put the person over there, and the building is going to reflect that hard sunlight and gives more tonality and exposure right over there, right? So I'm going to take another light setup right now. So I'm going to move this a bit. So let's pretend that the sun is coming from straight forward, right? So straightforward, and especially I took the background. Normally I have a black background. I took it away because this is reflecting a lot of light. So what happens if you look through this camera, you see a light face, but you see also a light background. It can be okay, but then you have to expose well. Now what can you do, for example? I grab again this, just a piece of carton, and I can play from here, and look what it does. If I look to this camera, look what it does. If I just play around, you see? The white background over there, I'm just making it less harsh. But his face is still in the light, right? And you can do whatever you want here. You can even come in from the side. So it's all a matter of, hey, how would I like it? You can play. Now the wall gets lighter and then his face. So I would definitely choose to do kind of like this. Right? And these days, I mean, you can have a clicker and make your photo if the sharpness is good. Or you have somebody with you. It all depends a little bit on how you do it. But it's all about the principle, how natural light can help you. So that's one thing. You can also say like, put it a little bit slant like this. You have a little bit more catch light. Also what you can do is very simple. You have a piece of carton and then you dim it a little bit. You see, this is just a piece of foam. You dim it a bit if it's too harsh. Yeah, there are all kind of things you can play with. So, and then I'm going to change it one more time. Here we go. I'm putting this right in the corner here. So this is to simulate a bit of a backlight. Let's say the sun is coming from behind. So what you see now is there's actually a beautiful line on the side of his head. But what happens is that this side doesn't have the attention you want. Maybe if you use a more of a portrait lens and you come closer, it's kind of fascinating to have only this catch light here. They often do that in the studio. They have one light from here and even one from here. And then another one from here. But you have this, if you see it in all these Hollywood actors, they all have one of these shots. Beautiful catch light here, and then just the eyes, even a bit more darker. But again, I can play with this. So this is a light reflector, but this one is even better with this gold, and you have them in silver, and you see, I just totally compensate the other side. So you get a bit of a there, and let's say 50-60% here. You see? Even to his eyes. Can you see that, Tom? Is it clear? Yeah. You see? So what I do here in a small way, in a very small environment, it's the same principle you use when you're in the city or in the forest, and you use the sunlight as a spot or the clouds to choose where I'm going to stand, what kind of soft light or dramatic light I want to use. It's basically you choose what you want. And if you use your manual settings, you're in control. And everything is at your disposal. So I'm showing it one more time here, you see? Right? So that's good. So this is really in a short, and this is like a half an hour talk, 45 minutes maybe, to give a bit of a basic insight in that when you are in control, it doesn't matter what light you have outside, because you can always make something of it. And let's say if you have like a very gray sky, well, put your camera to black and white settings, and then play with black and white and the softer contrasts and buildings and people, and it doesn't matter. You can use any light outside to your benefit, but you have to kind of play with it and discover it. So my suggestion is that I'm going to sit back again, and maybe some question and answers. Is there anything? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Rob. I'm just going to put this one out, and we go back to lower light. Okay, so basic thing is don't use your auto setting because you're not in control. The camera always tries to get the balance of best, and basically it's a bit boring. So try to be in control, first of all with your manual settings and in combination with your outdoor light, because it's working for you. That's the basic thing. And the light is fascinating. It never stops to amaze me what you can do with it. So maybe Tom, you can, is there any question I can answer concerning this?
Yeah, there's one question. How would you measure lights then in these kind of contrasts? That was an earlier question.
Yeah, let's say I love to work in studio settings. I have a meter for it, but outside these days with all the cameras, especially all the digital cameras with a beautiful screen in the background, you just change your setting along the way, and you see through your electronic viewfinder or on the back screen, you see how it works for you. But these days with electronic viewfinders, the image is so good. So try to play, and you have now unlimited, you can shoot unlimited kind of. So I would say when you have a situation and you have a gray sky and you say, okay, I like this building, put a few different settings and decide which one you like best. But again, it's better to underexpose a little bit than to overexpose, because with overexposure, you lose the details. And with underexposure, you can do later in software, you can crank up the shadows. It's a simple little trick that nobody teach me in college, which I just don't forget to highlight the shadows. You can see there's always more into your shot, more into the data of your shot than you think. I hope this helped.
If there's any other questions, if you want to just ask if there's anything else, but that was the main question.
Yeah, that was the main question, yeah. So I'm going back to the slide here. So to recap, every situation asks for different settings. Again, if you want to become more into photography, a photographer, you have to do it manual. You have to play manual. And you have manual and you have an almost manual setting with your, that you can have a fixed f-stop, for example, but basically it expands your experience and possibilities when you do things manual. And in the beginning it's a bit of a struggle, but the more you do it, it becomes kind of a automatic and a muscle memory. So you know, you do these things and then click, 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 click. So I work 95%. I work on manual. Auto settings only work up to a certain point. Software plus good light settings makes it a great photo, but not put everything in post-processing and software, because you miss the chance to have the photo actually really good. Play, 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 always play and find your way. There's questions, yeah. I think that's it. Are we in the 45 limit? Good. I hope this worked for you. You can watch this again. I didn't give hundreds of tips and tricks that you can do. It's just you watching what kind of light it is and what works for you. And then you should go out in every kind of light, in the sunset, in the sunrise, in the cloudy days, even rainy days give a dramatic effect, especially with maybe the water on the street kind of mirroring the shadows. Just play with it and you will start to understand what works for you and what creates a better photo.
One more question just came in.
One more question.
Yeah, what's the best angle to use for the reflector?
That really depends. I cannot give you like it's a 45 or whatever. It's always where does the light come from, and imagine that exactly on the other side, like 100% targeted on the frame. It's the best angle. As soon as you turn your thing, it will lose its maximum reflection capacities. That's the thing. If the sun comes from here and your reflector is here, it bounces 100%, depending on the material. If it's you know, the orange kind of foley, aluminium kind of stuff, it reflects more. If it's just white paper, it reflects maybe 40%. But this is your most reflective angle. As soon as you turn it, that's the way you start to play and dimming and, you know. So start from the perfect angle of reflection and then move it around. See what it does on your subject. You have to train your eyes because it's subtle. It's not, the sun is harsh, but the reflector is more subtle.
Another question,
Yeah.
a few are coming in now. The white balance, should it stay on daylight for exterior?
That's actually a good question. Actually, I didn't mention that. In this case, I would put daylight on automatic because I shoot in RAW, and RAW is where you preserve the most data in a photo. JPEG is a bit more compromised. I put it on automatic because in post-processing I still can change it. So if I shoot with clouds but it's a sunny day, I still can adjust it exactly how I want it in post-processing. But it's the only thing I would say, just put it on auto for now, because it's not really, if you put it on you know, the indoor lights and you're outdoor, it doesn't give big benefit unless you really want to get into artsy effects. So put it on auto mode, that part, and the rest you try to decide what you want. Yeah, good one.
One more here. Bright spot. If you're shooting into a sunset, how do you avoid the bright spot of the sunset?
Okay, it's kind of impossible because as soon as your angle of your sun comes into your lens, and you should have like a bit of a sun reflector on it, then you get, as soon as it comes into your lens, it gets a flare, and a flare is like you see all these rings in colors, and then you see it also, for example, in Star Wars, they used it by purpose if they follow like a spaceship, and then that way then the flare comes in. It gave the people a very almost realistic feeling, like this is real, this is filmed on spot and not in the studio. So this flare can be annoying, but can also be kind of artistic. It's physics. It's light coming in on all these glass inside of the lens, and sometimes you have 8 or 11 pieces, depending on the pro quality, and they all catch a little bit of this light in there. When you shoot in the sunlight, and the sun is right over there, sunset, you cannot avoid the bright spot. What I do is underexpose it, and in the software later on in your computer, I highlight or I upgrade the shadows, because if you do the landscape and the street and everything correct, but the sun is over there, it's going to be an overblown highlight, which is it's not so nice. So try to make sure that if the sun is orange, that you get the orange in your electronic viewfinder or on your screen, and then the photo might look a little dark, but at least you have the clouds and the sun in a beautiful warm tone, and then later on you adjust a little bit of the shadows, and then the landscape, which is dark in the photo that you shot, becomes a little lighter. So you cannot avoid it unless you change your exposure and make your photo a bit darker, so that your sun becomes actually, beautiful red or something like that. Okay, good question.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate it. Thank you for Creator Space. This is amazing that this can all be sent out freely to everybody. I hope to see you next time. In November there will be some Lightroom and post-processing lessons at least from me. There's a lot of other stuff at Creator Space that you can watch for free. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much, Rob. And hope to see you next time. Play with your camera and the lights that you are. It's all there. Thank you.